Well, a new report from City Council is raising eyebrows over public restrooms at New York City parks. Most had health and safety issues. 9% of bathrooms were closed.
Wow, these are even worse than I thought. And it's crazy to think that these bathrooms cost New York City $500 million per year to keep, just like this. But it's not just bad bathrooms. In fact, some of our parks are complete no-go zones.
Your litter goes here, but it's full, so it ends up here, and here, and here. Upkeep across city parks hasn't been the same recently.
This park used to be the most cleanest, but now everywhere you look, there's garbage.
They nicknamed her Godzilla, the 5-foot-long female alligator rescued from a lake in Prospect Park.
I am terrified to imagine that I would find an alligator in Prospect Park Lake. I think that's a lot.
Hidden among the picturesque views of Central Park are dangers lurking in standing pools of water. Overnight, trucks carrying pesticides sprayed neighborhoods across Upper Manhattan to try and kill adult mosquitoes carrying West Nile virus.
He lives over there.
People told us to look out for at least one, maybe more, coyotes. And within minutes, you now see what we saw, a coyote sitting at the edge of a lawn where people like to walk their dogs.
It's very dangerous having the coyotes around here with these dogs, and kids are playing. This is a playground, you don't understand.
So our parks are now so overrun with garbage, people say they're turning into landfills. But what nobody's talking about is that parks overrun with garbage, those are the signs of a city that's failing its residents in more ways than one. Because we keep hearing about what a precious resource our environment is and how we need more green spaces in the city. And we're told how the $600 million spent on our parks is worth it because we're gonna make sure they're the best public parks in the entire world. But really, does this, or any park in the city for that matter, look like a $600 million park? And why are the bathrooms so horrific? Well, critics say this is what happens when a city has access to too much of its residents' money and wastes it and then demands more. Because while our parks are struggling without the needed resources to care for them, New York is spending money on just about everything else, and it's even cut funding to the Parks Department so it can fund other more politically controversial programs. Which is why our parks look like nobody takes care of them. In fact, the city's so broke it's doing everything in its power to make sure they look like this. Laying off hundreds of workers in its Parks Opportunity Program, which employs New Yorkers while helping them complete a high school equivalency program. Which brings us to the real reason why our parks are failing. Our city government has failed in its mission to coordinate basic yard work, which is a shame because our government extracts a heavy toll on us by way of taxes, fines, and fees. And a nice park would certainly be something to show for our trouble. But what's even worse is some parks employees who still have their jobs report that they lack basic items like trash bags and soap, which has made it impossible to clean up after filthy New Yorkers who litter with no regard for the size of their ever-expanding carbon footprint. And that trash acts as a magnet to wild animals, which could be dangerous to people and children. But not quite as dangerous as what you'll find inside some of our bathrooms. I think this one's even worse than the last one, and it's not the fault of the people that are supposed to clean these places. They're understaffed. In fact, it's not uncommon for a massive park like this to have just one person in charge of cleaning it, and that includes the restroom facilities. And sadly, the problems we see here in this park are also present in other parks.
When you gotta go, you gotta go. But a new city council report suggests restrooms at public parks probably aren't the best options. Their investigation, Nature Calls, inspected over 100 public restrooms and found that majority had health or safety issues or were closed.
70% of our...
Yeah, so 70% of the bathrooms in our parks look like this one. That's great news. However, this park has toilet paper and it has soap and the water works. That was the same at the other park bathroom that I visited earlier. That one also had soap and it was being cleaned by somebody when it was open. So the employees, they're doing what they can with their limited time and resources. But what's disturbing about all this is New York City wants to be a pedestrian-friendly green city. But there's nothing pedestrian-friendly or green about this. It's a dump. Yet these are the resources we're relying on to convince people to start walking around everywhere, live a healthy lifestyle, and save the planet. And critics say this is what happens when you throw massive amounts of money at something with the best of intentions, but no game plan. Because at the same time as we're failing in our mission to take care of our public restrooms, the city is spending even more money developing other green spaces in other parts of town to become even more pedestrian friendly, yet those pedestrians don't have the most basic of creature comforts. And the only people benefiting from such a disaster are places like Starbucks that also have bathrooms and will sell you something. So those probably aren't going to go away anytime soon. They're going to have even more business the worse this gets. But that's the thing. Why should the people of New York have to pay for bad bathrooms and Starbucks bathroom breaks?
They're usually dirty, they're not well kept, there's too few.
Sometimes they are okay, sometimes they are not. It was all right, the water was running, there was some tissue on the floor.
The City Parks Department quickly said the report is not a representative sample, sending Fox 5.
So it seems like other people have also noticed the deplorable condition of our park facilities. And as somebody who works outside, I'll tell you, I've noticed, and I actually think 70% failure rate for our bathrooms is pretty generous. I would have expected at least, 72%. I think it's worse than that. But before we get into the issues facing our parks that are even more alarming than what you'll find inside one of the restrooms, it's important to understand that the Parks Department responded to this report, saying that it paints an unfair picture of the state of our parks. They said the investigators who wrote the report only looked at bathrooms they already knew had problems. And their report makes the bathroom problem seem worse than it really is. And it kind of does, because even though these bathrooms are bad, they do technically work. And the lights are on. And although they were old, they were clean. And what's really unfair about this is the Parks Department doesn't have the resources to do its job, yet they get blamed for that job not taking place. One guy gets blamed for not cleaning an entire massive park that's several acres in size, when it's up to our leaders to decide what to spend our money on and what not to spend our money on. And the lousy conditions inside our bathrooms, those persist outside of them as well, unfortunately. And our environmentally conscious city planners have some pretty interesting ideas for how to clean these parks up.
New York City now trying to stop rat thieves from stealing pies from parks. It's testing out these specially designed trash cans to handle those bulky pizza boxes that we try to jam into the cans with the round opening. And they often just fall onto the ground.
So it looks like instead of getting rid of the trash that's already in our parks, we're gonna spend lots of money designing a new type of trash can for one specific type of trash. As if pizza boxes are the only type of waste we're gonna find here that didn't go where it was supposed to go. To be honest with you, they should probably think of how to redesign the existing trash cans we have, because they aren't working the way they're supposed to be. Or maybe the city should fine people who litter in the parks. What about that? Then they could use all the money from these fines to help save our parks, which need it. But no, we're gonna get expensive new pizza box trash cans, which were probably designed on a computer by somebody with a college degree. What will they think of next? Possibly a trash can just for water bottles, or maybe a trash can for McDonald's waste, since I seem to see a lot of that around here. Now look, you can design all the fancy stuff you want. That isn't gonna clean our bathrooms, and it's not gonna clean our parks. We need people here to physically do that. Yet the Parks Opportunity office here at this park is closed. And sadly, I saw somebody waiting outside. I don't know if they were trying to get in or what, but it's not open and the park's open. Now this article here talks about one park uptown which is understaffed to the point where they cannot take care of it at all. Kind of like the park we're standing in now. Now, according to this article, the park in question used to have 30 Parks Opportunity Program employees plus 12 full-time employees. But now those numbers have been nuked. They're down to 9 Parks Opportunity and 9 full-time employees. That's just 18. That's less than half the number of people that they had taking care of these places before. And what's worse is that 18 of those folks were getting help to finish high school and were getting a job at the same time. So now what are they gonna do? If this was the only job they had and they never finished high school, I don't really want to think about what their future looks like right now. The city's failed them too. Perhaps we should stop spending money on trash cans people aren't using and go back to spending money on people. That sounds like a better plan to me, especially when basic economics teaches us that until somebody gets their first job, they won't ever get their second job. And the longer we wait to make basic changes, the longer it's gonna take for these parks to get cleaned up, because they're not able to clean up themselves. Our parks can't do that, yet they're getting more traffic than ever before because we keep installing things like bike lanes all over the place, which are great, but will increase traffic to publicly accessible places that you couldn't normally get to by car. But the problems we've got with disgusting bathrooms and trash piling up at our parks do more than attract things like flies and rats. In fact, all that waste has been attracting other types of animals to our parks, which could be very dangerous for people. You might be surprised to know that unlike the last park we're in, New York has some parks that are large enough and wooded enough to harbor animals other than rats and pigeons and flies. Although I don't think we're gonna see any out here. This park is pretty clean. Although with trash piling up just about everywhere in this city, I guess anything's possible.
Here's what we encountered. As soon as we entered Claremont Park,
I he live over there.
People told us to look out for at least one, maybe more, coyotes. And within minutes, you now see what we saw, a coyote sitting at the edge of a lawn where people like to walk their dogs.
So as if our parks didn't have enough problems, now you have to worry about apex predators like coyotes, because we now have a coyote problem. And what's interesting about this report is the park where they found the coyotes, it's similar to this one. It's surrounded by buildings and traffic and honking and people, usually things that keep animals like coyotes far away. And the reason that animals like that are now wandering around our parks is because of the trash issues that are happening pretty much everywhere. I mean, if there weren't pizza boxes and McDonald's wrappers and half-eaten Chipotle burritos lying around, they wouldn't have anything to eat, so they wouldn't show up. And locals say their coyote problem has been getting worse over the last few months.
There have been coyotes spotted in more wooded parts of the city before, but Claremont Park is in the middle of the Bronx. The neighborhood surrounding it is urban.
So apparently this is not the first time coyotes have been spotted in parks like this before. It's happened in the past. Heavily wooded parks are more likely to have them because there's just more places for them to hide that seem like their natural habitat. But that's frightening because parks are where people walk their dogs. Parks are where little kids are playing. That could be very dangerous. And even if those coyotes don't bite anybody, having animals like that roaming our parks, they're just gonna bring with them more unsanitary conditions, digging through trash, making messes, possibly spreading diseases. You know, speaking of unsanitary, if that's locked, you probably don't want to go in there.
But in the last few decades, more trees and greenery have been added to the borough.
As the city is devoted to making more and more green spaces, by default, they're making more habitat for wildlife, and in this case, they're making habitat for coyotes.
The city's Parks Department told us in a statement, we have no reason to...
You know, I bet nobody who's in charge of how our city decides to do things and what they decide to spend money on would have thought that untended to green initiatives would end up being a disaster for just about everybody, because when you've got these heavily wooded areas, if you don't clean them, they're gonna look like a forest that's neglected, and that's gonna bring in all kinds of problems. Plus, trash is gonna get stuck in it. It's not necessarily good for coyotes either, and those coyotes, the more they eat food that comes from people, the more accustomed to humans they're gonna get, and the more aggressive they'll probably become. According to this website, the first thing you're supposed to do is not feed coyotes. That's dangerous. Yet that's gonna happen whether we want it to or not, because we're not emptying our trash, and it's only a matter of time before these coyotes get so accustomed to being around people that they start preying upon them. And according to urbancoyoteresearch.com, if you see coyotes in a park like this and they can see you, that's already a very bad sign. But there are other much more dangerous animals that have recently been discovered in our parks.
They nicknamed her Godzilla, the 5-foot-long female alligator rescued from a lake in Prospect Park back in February 2023. She was suffering from extreme cold. After she died, we learned she'd swallowed a 4-inch wide bathtub stopper. As sad as her death was, Annie Cooper knows it could have been far worse.
So it's not just trash. People abandon their pets that they don't want to take care of anymore in our parks. That alligator was someone's pet. You know what's very sad? Apparently, according to park rangers, people will abandon their dogs in a park. They'll just release their dog and say, hey, if somebody wants a dog, they can just have my dog. But apparently it doesn't really work out like that, which is why the city's now talking about fining people who let their animals go in a park. And New York is full of weirdos. You got people with all kinds of animals living in their apartments that they probably shouldn't even have in there and are probably very dangerous. And the last thing we want in our parks is for little kids or families or the vulnerable to get injured, which is going to happen more often if we don't do something about the utter lawlessness that we're letting take place in what are supposed to be great natural resources we need to protect. And what's crazy is with all of the green preaching that we get from our leaders, you figure they would be putting their money where their mouths are on this one and really be taking care of our parks. And you'd figure that there would be real punishments for people who fill our parks up with garbage or release animals in them. But no, people are treating our parks like dumps. That's what they're turning into. They're getting dangerous. Now we got a coyote problem at some places. But then of course we've got the issues with violence in our parks. There's been a recent crime spree of robberies in Central Park, and now that place is crawling with police. And maybe that's part of the problem. If people don't feel safe in our parks to begin with, why are they going to try and take care of them? They're not going to hang around long enough to clean up after themselves. They're just going to get in and get out. Also, since we're not maintaining our streets the way that we're supposed to, a lot of the trash in some of these parks could have blown in from sidewalks. And what that means is declining parks are a sign that the city is failing to do basic things. And as those basic things stop happening, the whole environment just deteriorates, leaving you with what you see in some of our parks, especially the bathrooms. What do you think about that? How would you clean up our parks? Should we treat them better than we do? What about those Parks Opportunity Program workers that lost their jobs? What should we do for them? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.